Hello everyone. This presentation will reference Rule 10 of our rulebook, Substitutions and Libero Replacements. As we go through the presentation, you'll notice that items highlighted in yellow reference our rulebook, and items highlighted in green reference specific sections in the EOA Handbook that may talk about different techniques that we use as an organization or any different signals or procedures that we use. First, let's cover some basic definitions. A substitution is the exchange of at least one player in the set by a teammate, the substitute who is listed on the roster. Comparatively, a Libero replacement is defined as the Libero designated on the lineup is allowed to replace any player in a back row position. Libero replacements do not count as substitutions and are unlimited. As referenced in previous sections or previous presentations, we know that the Libero wears a different colored jersey than his or her teammates, must be a unique number, so they are easily identified on the court. Therefore, that's how we distinguish the difference between a substitute and a Libero replacement. In addition to the different jerseys worn by substitutes and Liberos, these exchanges and substitutions take place in different areas on the court. As you can see in this diagram, the Libero replacement zone takes place in the back zone of the court between the end line and the attack line, and the substitution zone occurs between the attack line and the center line, closer to the R2. When officially requesting a substitute, the coach has two options. Visually, they can look at the R2 and use the substitution signal as referenced in the handbook, or the substitute can enter the subzone, again, the center line to the attack line. If this is the option they choose to use, the coach does not also need to verbally request a sub. Just the fact that the substitute has crossed that 10-foot line into the subzone then makes it a legal substitution request. Once a request has occurred, the R2 will recognize the request by whistling and signaling. Couple notes here, a team is allowed 18 substitutions per set, and there are a couple notes on page 15 of our handbook that reference EOA-specific mechanics related to substitutions when it comes to whistling once or twice if both teams request subs at the same time, official mechanics, and other things like that. So make sure you reference back page 15 of our handbook for those organization-specific techniques that we use. Let's talk about a few things that could go wrong during a substitution. First, we have what we would call an improper sub. There are a couple scenarios here. Let's say the substitute and the outgoing player who's leaving the court do not take the correct exchange positions, aka they do not enter the sub zone the way they're supposed to. Or if the sub and or the outgoing player exchange before the R2 directs them to do so. We will call both of these improper substitutions. We also have what we call delayed subs, also known as an illegal substitution. If a coach withdraws a sub request after it has been recognized and whistled by the R2, this would be a delay. If the sub fails to immediately report to the sub zone after a request is recognized by the R2, this would also be considered a delay. If the sub fails to enter the court when indicated by the R2, again, a delay. Or if the substitution request includes multiple players, but multiple players do not report to the subzone ready to enter the court at the R2's direction and therefore cause a delay in the match. If you have a situation when you do have one of these improper or delayed subs, we do have penalties for these specific scenarios. If you were to issue an unnecessary delay, the first offense in the set would be an administrative yellow card. Subsequent offenses in the same set would be an administrative red card. Some scenarios, again, covering these if the substitution is delayed. If the R2 denies the substitute, whether the sub is illegal or if they're wearing illegal equipment, uniform, jewelry, and the R2 denies the sub, this would be an unnecessary delay. Or if the team repeatedly uses improper substitutions during the set, the R2 could, at his or her discretion, issue that unnecessary delay. After a team is charged with an unnecessary delay for any of the above reasons, they cannot request any more subs until the next completed rally. The previously mentioned scenarios were all improper or delayed substitutions. The next couple scenarios would be considered illegal substitutions. First, this is directly out of our rulebook. The position of the substitute shall be that of the player replaced without changing the serving order. In other words, the substitute entering the court must go to the serving position of the player they are replacing. More examples of illegal subs include the following. If a sub occurs without following the required procedure, if a sub re-enters or even attempts to re-enter the set during the same dead ball, again, there must be a full completed rally before subsequent substitution requests by the same players. If a sub was previously replaced by an exceptional substitution, those scenarios will be discussed later on in this presentation. If a team requests a substitute beyond their already allotted 18 subs, or if the sub does not assume the original position in the serving order. In other words, let's say number 1 started on the court in position 1. If they sub out during the set, and when they sub back in, they started in position 1, but they enter the court and go to position 4. That was not their original position in the serving order, therefore that would be an illegal sub. Beyond the allotted 18 substitutions allowed to a team per set, you may run into a scenario where a team needs to use what we call an exceptional substitution. This would be necessary if you need a sub to replace an injured or ill player. We have a couple different options that we have to choose from, going in the following order when it comes to priority of what scenario the coach chooses to go with. Our first choice would be to have the injured or ill player be replaced by a teammate who has never played in the set, or a player who has played in that position earlier in the set, aka someone who has already subbed in that position, or a player on the bench who is not committed to any position in the serving order. If that's not an option, our next choice would be to have the player replaced by any legal, non-Libero teammate on the bench who is not currently being replaced by the Libero, aka if you have a player on the bench who had already been subbed in, but maybe in a different position, at this point they would be considered an exceptional sub and be allowed to go in for the injured or ill player, even though technically they are not allowed in that serving position. If neither of our first two options are feasible, our last choice would be to allow the Libero to replace the injured or ill player if no other possible exceptional substitutions exist. If this is what happens, the Libero must switch to a regular team uniform and the team continues play without a Libero for the rest of the set. A few key points to remember when we're discussing exceptional subs. Exceptional sub is only an option if the team has used all 18 subs or if there are no legal substitutes available on the bench. If a team has only used 12 of their subs, but they're forced to use an exceptional sub due to the players that are available, that exceptional sub does count towards that running tally of 18 subs for the team. However, if a team has used all 18 subs, they are still allowed to use an exceptional sub without it penalizing them for going beyond their allotted 18 subs. If you have an injured or ill player who's replaced by an exceptional substitution, they may not re-enter the court during the same set. If they recover and they are able to play in subsequent sets, they are then allowed to re-enter the match. Looking beyond the nitty-gritty of the rulebook into some of the things that are discussed in our handbook on pages 14 and 15, some little things that you can start to focus on: only allowing one substitute into the subzone at a time, making sure we're setting that precedent early on in the season. Both the player and the sub should remain in the subzone until released by the R2. Don't let those players run onto the court without you authorizing them. Again, get them in the habit earlier on in the season to have it become more second nature to those players. If you're in the middle of a timeout and the coach requests a sub, instruct them to wait until the timeout is over. You will then authorize a sub once both teams have returned to the court at the end of the timeout. If both teams request subs simultaneously, we only need to use one whistle. This is a EOA specific mechanic that we use. And then after a team has used their 15th sub, the R2 should notify the head coach about how many subs their team has used. You will continue to do this all the way up through the 18th sub. So after you administer the sub, you turn to the head coach, give your substitution signal and say, "Coach, you have used 15 subs, 16 subs, all the way up to the 18th sub," letting them know every single time how many subs they have used. Once a team has used all 18 subs, not only will you notify the coach, you will also turn to your R1 and notify them that the team has used all 18 subs, using that same mechanic of signaling for a substitution and then holding up the number 18 so the R1 knows that that team no longer has any subs available to use. Moving on to the Libero or the Libero, depending on who you choose to speak to about it. There are some other rules relevant to the Libero besides what we'll cover in Rule 10. Those are referenced here for you to go back and double check. Just talking about the legal uniform that the Libero must wear, their position on the court, how a coach and team should identify them on the roster, what they are legally and not allowed to do during playing action. Some replacements are discussed in Rule 9. We will specifically cover Rule 10 here. specifically Rule 10-4. As mentioned earlier, a team has unlimited Libero replacements they are allowed to use throughout the set, and they are not related to substitutions. They occur in different parts of the court, and they are a different type of replacement. Specifically, the Libero may replace any player in the back row. The most important thing to remember is whomever the Libero replaces must be the player who then returns to the court to replace the Libero when the Libero is either ready to come off or is about to rotate to the front row. If a Libero is replacing multiple players during a set, they must sit out for at least one full rally before re-entering the court to replace another player. The one exception to this rule is if the Libero is in left back, and when rotating, they would normally enter the court and then re-enter in order to serve in their one allowed service rotation. The Libero is allowed to just stay on the court instead of coming off and then going back on immediately, and the two regular players would switch places. So it looks like two traditional players are switching in the back zone, but it really is a double Libero replacement. The Libero is leaving the court for the player returning to the front row and then coming immediately back on to service zone 1 to serve. Libero replacements, again, do not count as substitutions. They are unlimited, and that replacement must occur between the attack line and the end line. And as far as the timing goes, it must be completed during a dead ball prior to the whistle and signal for service. Just like with our substitutions earlier, let's talk about what could possibly go wrong when it comes to illegal Libero replacements. If the Libero or the replacement player is in the set without following the required procedures, previously I mentioned the timing, when the replacement must occur, and where it must occur on the court. If those rules are not followed, that would be considered an illegal Libero replacement. If the Libero or the replacement player is not listed on the roster as a legal player, that would also be considered illegal. Or if a Libero other than the designated Libero on the lineup card enters the court to replace another player. This could become an issue if a team has multiple Liberos wearing the Libero jersey, but the coach designates number 2 on the lineup sheet for that set. If they get mixed up and one of their other Liberos decides to run onto the court, if they were not listed on the roster as the one legal playing Libero, that would be considered illegal. When talking about penalties associated with illegal Libero replacements, timing is everything. It's very important to distinguish if the illegal Libero replacement takes place prior to the whistle and signal for service or after that whistle or signal. First, if that illegal replacement takes place prior to the whistle and signal for service, you would have an unnecessary delay. First offense of the set would be an administrative yellow card, and any subsequent offenses in that same set would move on to an administrative red card. However, if that illegal replacement occurs after the whistle and signal for service, you then have an illegal alignment scenario, which would result in a loss of rally and a point for that team. As soon as the illegal replacement is identified, no matter when it happens, it needs to be corrected. The illegal Libero shall either legally enter the court or be replaced by a legal player. As an official, once you recognize an illegal Libero replacement, there are a couple steps you have to go through to figure out the score sheet. This is very important for the R2 to communicate with the scorekeeper and the assistant scorekeeper or a Libero tracker. If we're talking about our serving team, and they are the ones who have done an illegal replacement, any points that are known to have been scored during a term of service in which that illegal Libero was on the court shall be canceled. This is important because as officials, you need to be aware of when that Libero entered the court, and you need to be able to say with certainty, you know the Libero was on the court for these points during their team's term of service. Therefore, all those points were illegal and need to be canceled. On the flip side, if we're talking about the receiving team, so Team B is our receiving team. They just lost the ball. So the ball has been sent over to the other side of the court. The serving team is now about to complete their first serve. If an illegal Libero replacement is recognized prior to the other team having their first serve, all points earned during that receiving team's previous term of service while the illegal Libero was on the court shall be canceled. Again, it's very important to communicate with your scorekeeper and assistant scorekeeper to determine exactly when that libero illegally was on the court. And if the other team has not served yet, you can go back and take out or cancel those points that were served while the illegal libero was on the court. After the serve has alternated and the first serve is contacted by the other team, at that point you can no longer go back and cancel points. You just have to correct the problem and go from there. There are possible scenarios where a team would be allowed to redesignate their libero if that libero is injured or ill and cannot play. First things first, the player that they are currently on the court for must legally replace them. Then a new libero may be redesignated using the following criteria. Any substitute on the bench may be designated as the new libero. If that player is redesignated, they must then change into a legal libero uniform with a unique number from all teammates and clearly contrasting in color, just like we follow our normal libero jersey rules. And they will then remain the libero for the remainder of the set as our redesignated libero. Last but not least, let's talk about liberos as they relate to their eligibility for exceptional substitution scenarios and disqualifications. If you are in a scenario where you're talking about using an exceptional substitution for an injured or ill player, again, like we said earlier, using your libero would be your last possible resort if no other options exist. If you get to that point and the libero is going to be your exceptional sub, they must change out of their libero uniform and wear the same uniform as the rest of the team. And for the rest of that set, the team will continue to play without a libero. They will not be allowed to redesignate after the libero is used for an exceptional substitution. If you have a player on a team that is disqualified during a set, the libero may under no circumstances be used as a substitute. And last but not least, if the libero themselves is disqualified during play, they must immediately be replaced by the player whom they originally replaced. Again, the team is not allowed to redesignate a libero. They must finish out the remainder of that set without a libero.